The day broke over the city with a soft hush, as if dawn itself drew a thin white line across the sky and asked everyone to be gentle. Harmattan dust drifted like fine chalk, powdering rooftops and noses, and the first buses lurched into motion with doors yawning open and conductors calling out to fill empty seats. On the edge of a busy roundabout, where the traffic lights worked when they wished and hawkers threaded between cars with trays of oranges and cold sachets of water, a man named Kunle folded his thin blanket, smoothed the corner with careful hands, and looked toward the future as if it were a stubborn goat that could still be led by a patient rope. Kunle lived under the flyover. He kept his corner clean and his belongings tied up in a blue nylon bag, and he had a memory for people's faces that made the drivers slow down to greet him. He was called a beggar by those who did not know his story, and a counselor by those who had listened to him. When anyone came with a problem, quarrels over market stalls, a driver who lost a day's earning from a broken fan belt, a woman whose goods were spoiled in the rain, Kunle would say, "I can correct it," and somehow, step by step he would. He had learned the language of the city's heartbeat, and he knew that most knots loosened if held with warm fingers and steady patience. Just before sunrise that morning, a black SUV rolled into the lay-by near the flyover and stopped with the engine idling. The windows were dark, but Kunle could hear a man breathing unevenly inside, a sound like someone wrestling an invisible weight. After a long pause, the rear door opened a little, and a hand dropped out, releasing a handkerchief stained with tears. Kunle approached without noise, and stood with a respectful distance. "Baba," he said softly. "Are you all right?" The man inside sucked a breath, then another, and when he finally lifted his face, Kunle recognized him from newspapers and billboards and office towers with his name embossed in gold letters. Chief Adeyemi was a builder of companies and mood changer of markets, a billionaire who held meetings that made the news. His eyes were red and swollen. He looked away, embarrassed by the intimacy of being seen. "Go on, leave me," Chief said hoarsely. "My father," Kunle answered. "You have money enough to command quiet, but tears answer no order. When tears want to fall, they fall. If I can help, I will." "Help," the chief repeated. As if the word were a stone he had to chew, he exhaled. "Everything is breaking in my hands. A factory where we bet the future has produced nothing that anyone wants. I have teams, I have consultants, I have experts with charts higher than my head, but the numbers reject me. My board is restless. Investors are calling for blood. I woke before the sun and drove here, and I asked God why. After all this winning, I am losing." Kunle listened until the chief's words ran out. Then, calmly, he said the line that people under the flyover already knew, "I can correct it." The chief blinked. "You? I can correct it," Kunle said again, not as a boast, but as a promise. "Not with magic, not with tricks, but step by step. There is a path out of a thicket if we bend the branches one by one." "What did you build that no one wants?" "A device," the chief said. "A small home power unit. We promised reliable light to millions. We thought we had designed for the streets, for the compounds, for the villages. We spent 2 years. We are ready to ship." But pilot users returned them. Complaints stacked up like the Lagos traffic on a Friday. "It drains too fast. It trips the fridge. It costs more than salary cycles can handle. Enough holes to sink a boat. No matter how we patch, water keeps rushing in." "Where did you learn to speak like this?" Kunle asked gently. "From being wrong," Chief answered with a cracked smile. "Then you have learned enough to be right," Kunle said. "Allow me to spend a week with you, not in your office, in the streets, where this device must live. You will pay me with food and shoes and time. We will listen until the noise becomes music." Chief stared at this man under the flyover, at his careful eyes and calm spine, and he found himself nodding. "Step by step," he murmured, as if testing the taste of the words. "All right, 1 week. Show me what my experts missed." They began that very morning. Kunle asked the driver to park the SUV and join them on a Danfo bus. The conductor eyed them humorously, but money hushes questions, and the three found space on a bench, where the foam poked through the torn fabric. The bus rattled along the ring road and then dove into streets where shops woke up like pupils widening, shutters rolling up with metallic clatter, the air filled with the smell of akara frying and ground pepper, and the day stretched its spine. Kunle led Chief into a courtyard, where women lined up with buckets at a borehole. He greeted them like a nephew returned from town. He asked about light, about the hum of generators, about what time babies cried when fans went off. He listened to the rhythms of bills paid weekly, the patchwork of solar panels on some rooftops, the trick of charging phones at a nearby salon with a generator that drank petrol like a thirsty trader drinks malt after noon prayers. He asked about the new device from Chief's company. 2 women had tried it and returned it. They said it carried a proud chest but small lungs. They moved on. In a tiny barber shop, Coonley asked the owner how often he charged clippers, and whether the new power unit could carry a full day's business. The barber spread his hands. The unit cannot carry 3 clippers and a fan. When there is heat, customers walk away. What am I to do? Lock the door. At a tailor's kiosk, Coonley asked about sewing machines, about powering iron boxes to press the seams neat, about the cost of buying 1 unit per shop versus 1 for a cluster. The tailor shook his head. The device cuts out whenever my apprentice presses the iron too long. You know when a cloth pleads to be smooth, you cannot rush it. My customers pay with their eyes. They went to the market. They listened to the allies where generator repairers lay on their backs under machines, shirts streaked black with oil, hands smelling of honest sweat. They listened to the way men measured price not only in naira, but in noise, in fatigue, in the friction between need and hope. They stood by a school where a teacher calculated the cycle of charges, and how many phones a unit could serve for extra income to buy chalk. They sat with a mama put who spoke of the rhythm of lunch service, and the shame of turning customers away when smoke refused to rise. By evening Chief's notebook bulged with observations. He had spoken in boardrooms and on television shows more times than he could count. Yet here, under the patient questioning of Coonley, he realized he had rarely listened for this long without interrupting. He looked at his watch and found he had not looked at it for hours. He was surprised by how free that made him. The second day Coonley took Chief to an outer ring of the city, where power lines dipped low, and the roads leaned into puddles large enough to reflect a whole sky. They visited a center where women roasted fish with charcoal, while men hauled crates of water in a relay of tired backs. The power unit had been rejected there too. The reason was simple. It could not start a freezer. The compressor asked for a short burst of power to kick it alive. The unit offered a steady trickle instead. Chief rubbed his forehead. How had his engineers missed that detail? They had measured watt-hours and forgot the kick of a motor's first gulp. On the 3rd day they rode into a village beyond the city, where the wind combed tall grasses and goats clicked their hooves across laterite. Coonley spoke the local greetings with playful respect. They sat with elders beneath a mango tree. Coonley asked about power for grinding machines in the harvest season, for lighting classrooms at night, when children gathered after farm work, for charging the community radio. The elders spoke in the rhythm of proverbs. A calabash must carry what the hand intends, On said, or the water will shame you down the path. Chief laughed softly, not at them, but with them, warmed by the sound of wisdom wearing simple shoes. They visited a clinic run by a nurse whose determination could have lit the whole district if grit were electricity. She showed them a refrigerator where vaccines needed a continuous cold chain. When power dropped and the refrigerator hiccuped, she watched with fear. The new unit, she said, gives up its breath too quickly here. Can your company design a lung that breathes in the tempos of our work? On the 4th day, Coonley insisted that Chief sit with the repairers again. Build with the people who will fix your device when you are not around, he said. Supply them with parts, with pictures, with explanations in the languages they speak to their own children. Make it easy to open without breaking seals. Make it cheap to replace the heart inside. The repairers nodded, touched by the respect of being invited to shape a product, rather than being handed a sealed box from on high. On the 5th day they sat in a quiet corner of a church compound, and Coonley asked Chief to lay the whole picture on the ground like a fishing net. Chief recited what they had gathered. The unit must handle short bursts of high current. It must be modular, so that clusters of small businesses could share and scale. It must respect weekly or daily income cycles. It must be repairable at kiosks without costly returns. It must speak not only in English on the label, but in the languages of the street through icons and clear diagrams. It must come with a financing plan that moved like the rhythm of the market instead of the rigid beat of a banker's calendar. Then Coonley said, "We are not merely correcting a product, We are correcting a way of listening. Chief sat very still. In that stillness he remembered his father, a trader who began with a wooden stall, and ended with 3, who counted trust more carefully than cash. He remembered a time before conference rooms, before spreadsheets, when he would follow his father through markets and watch him collect a debt with a soft laugh because tomorrow's relationship mattered more than today's scolding. When did I forget this? He asked the air, and no one needed to answer. By the 6th day, Chief had summoned his head of engineering, his head of marketing, his finance director, and 2 stubborn product managers to meet him at a community hall. He introduced them to Kunle without ceremony. "This man will lead us through a redesign," he said. They glanced at Kunle's sandals and swallowed their surprise. They respected Chief's authority, but their faces asked their own questions. "We will begin with humility," Kunle said. "You will spend 2 days without telling anyone what you think they should want. You will follow hairdressers and welders and teachers through their hours. You will wash your hands where they wash, eat where they eat, wait where they wait. After that we will draw again. This time we will draw what fits their lives, rather than asking their lives to stretch and fit our drawing." They went out in pairs and came back with bright eyes and crowded notebooks. The product managers who had defended old decisions now argued to throw them away. The engineers who had optimized for cost now fought to add durability to the parts that met the cruel hands of daily use. The finance director, who had dismissed pay-as-you-go as messy, calculated a model that lived in harmony with weekly cash flows. Marketing, which had prepared glossy billboards, replaced them with a plan to seed units among trusted repairers and community leaders, letting word move through the grapevine that never sleeps. On the 7th day they assembled prototypes. They tested with the barber, who demanded 3 clippers and a fan at midday. They tested with the mama put who needed to power a chest freezer at dawn and dusk. They tested at the clinic, at the school evening classes, at the borehole where women rested and gossiped between buckets. For the first time, smiles outnumbered frowns. "This one carries a brave heart," the barber said. The mama put nodded. "This one does not breathe shallow when the heat rises." The nurse placed a thermometer in the vaccine fridge and watched the line remain steady, and her mouth quivered with relief. Chief's board met 2 weeks later in a room where the carpet was soft enough to encourage expensive decisions. He told them the truth without drama. "We built the right thing in the wrong way. We have corrected our listening, and corrected our design. Here is the plan." He laid out financing tailored to daily incomes. He detailed a repair network that would receive spare parts and training before the first shipment. He proposed a pilot not in affluent neighborhoods where people already had alternatives, but in working districts where need could be met with dignity. He proposed partnerships with women's cooperatives and apprentices unions, groups whose word could bring a product into homes faster than any ad. The oldest board member, a woman whose factories had survived 4 changes of government, smiled. At last, she said, "We are breathing with the city." There were still obstacles. A regulator who wanted his palm oil needed to be carried into the light. An importer who had long enjoyed a monopoly on generator parts threatened sabotage. A rival firm called the new approach a publicity stunt. The newspapers divided their columns, some praising, some jeering. Chief would go home late, and find his heart beating fast with old fear. On those nights he drove to the flyover and found Kunle, who sat with him quietly, until the night peeled away like bark. One afternoon, as they waited for the first large batch to come off the line, Chief turned to Kunle. "Tell me your story. I can only follow you with full trust, if I know how you built this calm." Kunle rubbed his palms together as if warming them at a small fire. "I was a teacher," he said simply. "In a small town near a border, I taught mathematics and civic studies. We had a project to repair the school roof with funds sent by the state. The money arrived like a nervous herd, small and twitchy. Some of it disappeared. I refused to sign papers that said otherwise. When the heat came, I was told I had stolen the money I had refused to touch. I was not charged, only dismissed with a whisper that followed me to every interview. I drifted to the city. At first I slept in a park, then under this flyover. Hunger sharpened my ears. When people argued around me, I found I could hold their words and hand back a shape that made sense. Neighbors began to seek me out. The name beggar stayed, but I became a gatherer of broken pieces. Chief leaned forward. Why did you not tell me this earlier? Because stories do their best work when they enter at the right time, Kunle replied with a small smile. Now you know why I trust the patient path. The pilot rolled out. Instead of a grand press conference, they invited the barber and the tailor and the mama put and the nurse. They received units engraved with a symbol that meant power shared, and a phone number to call that connected to a real human who spoke with courtesy and took responsibility. The first week, people watched for failure. The second week they sent cousins to buy. The third week, repairers posted on a board about small fixes and parts they needed, and the company delivered before sundown. Payment plans tightened neatly around pay cycles. A woman paid on Fridays after her stew pots sold out. A welder paid on Mondays after weekend jobs. When bills threatened to fall behind, field officers visited with respect and rearranged schedules rather than snapping shut the door. Customers began to speak of the company like a neighbor who greeted every morning. Chief received an urgent call from an investor in London, who spoke fast about scale and margins. Chief answered calmly. We will scale with the pace of trust, he said. We have learned the cost of outrunning our people. Sales rose, not in a surge that burned out the lungs, but like a tide that climbed and did not recede. The board relaxed their shoulders. The rivals quieted. The newspapers sent reporters to the flyover. They found Kunle there with his blue nylon bag, his corner still swept, though now he wore new sandals and a clean shirt. He refused to move into an apartment until the company built a listening office, a small open house by the market where anyone could walk in and speak about the product or anything at all. Chief insisted that the first listening office carry Kunle's name. He laughed. Place your name if you like, he said. The work will carry mine. Months passed. A drought pressed the countryside. The company adapted again, releasing a variant of the unit that could power community borehole pumps at dawn and dusk when queues swelled. They partnered with a microfinance bank that had women at the helm, and default rates stayed low because dignity was part of the contract. They set up a scholarship for apprentices who designed clever hacks, and the open repair culture turned from liability to pride. When a unit failed, it entered a circle of hands that understood it, and emerged ready again. The company's profits rose without apology, and they invested a portion in public libraries with evening classes where children could read under steady light, and not squint at smoky lanterns. Reporters asked Chief for his secret. He did not mention algorithms or supply chains or mergers. He said, I found a teacher under a flyover who reminded me that business is the art of listening deeply and acting with respect. When accolades arrived, a global award for inclusive design, an invitation to speak at a summit, Chief placed Kunle in the front row and introduced him as Director of Listening. Kunle accepted only on the condition that every manager spend a week each quarter observing life beyond office walls. He designed an orientation that began not in conference rooms but at dawn, with feet dusty from walking, with the language of the street on the tongue, with rice eaten from a shared bowl after a morning learning what work feels like without climate control. Young graduates who had imagined leadership as giving orders learned to carry crates and stand in queues and return with new eyes. Not everything was solved by light. A boy still stole a phone from a charging station and had to return it with tears and an apology. A woman still lost a day's income when heavy rain flattened the footpath and customers stayed home. A regulator still asked for favors, and the company had to fight that old hydra again. But the difference was this. The community began to defend the company because the company had defended them. When a rumor spread that the units caught fire, the barber and the nurse and the repairer went on radio and corrected it. When thieves targeted a warehouse, neighbors rang bells and chased them away. The product belonged to the people because the listening had been shared too. One evening, Chief stood on a rooftop with Kunle and watched the city glitter. He spoke softly. Do you know the first night you told me I can correct it? I wanted to argue with you. Pride bruises slowly. I am grateful I swallowed it. Kunle shook his head. You taught me too. I had a habit of thinking in little circles close to the ground. Now I can think about systems without forgetting the ground. We met in the middle,
and the middle is where progress grows. Chief asked him to sound the future. What next? He said, like a drummer asking another drummer to carry the beat forward. Kunli breathed in the night. Take the model to water, he said. Not only pumps, but purification for compounds. Build with those who carry the buckets. Create pricing that understands school fees and hospital emergencies. Bring repair to the riverside. Train young people as water stewards who earn from maintaining the units. If we can correct light, we can correct water. Step by step, they did. In riverfront neighborhoods, where children leaped from wooden jetties and fishermen returned with nets that told stories of plenty or warning, the company introduced a small rugged filter unit that clicked onto existing storage drums. They rolled out in partnership with plank sellers and boatmen, with leaders who did not wear suits but carried real authority in their calloused hands. Again the listening office led. Again the community wrote the manual with their stories. Cases of waterborne illness dropped, and clinics felt the relief of seeing fewer mothers arriving at night with feverish babies. An old rumor about Kunli circulated, dressed in new clothes, that he carried a charm that softened hard men. People wanted to believe in magic. He did not correct them with loudness. He smiled and said, "The charm is patience. If you sit long enough at the crossroads, you learn which path is a dead end, and which one leads home." The greatest test came after a year when a global drop in the price of a key component threatened to ruin the budget forecasts, and tempt the company to chase margins by swapping materials. The finance director drew up a plan to cut corners. Chief frowned. Kunli asked him to visit 10 customers before signing. They went together. They sat with a woman who ran a cold drink kiosk whose profit lived inside the thin line between steady cooling and melted ice. They sat with a welder who had taken 2 apprentices because the unit allowed more hours of work. They sat with a teacher who ran evening classes for girls who could not attend in daylight. Chief returned to the office and tore up the plan. "No cheap parts," he told the room. "We will hold our standard. We will find savings in our own excess. We will not pay by reducing another woman's hope." The team rallied. They reduced marketing vanity, traded glossy for honest, renegotiated with suppliers by offering longer commitments, and cut their own perks. The unit stayed strong. Customers noticed, even if they did not know the language of capacitors and housings. They felt it in the way the power held firm during the hardest hours. Loyalty deepened. At the end of the second year, Chief hosted a small Thanksgiving. Not a spectacle, just a gathering under the mango tree in the village where the elders had spoken first. He brought cola nuts and listened again. The nurse came and laughed and cried and told how steady cold had turned worry into sleep. The barber brought his apprentices, now saving to open their own shops. The mama brought a pan of jollof that silenced the crowd for a moment because good food commands respect. Repairers came with hands still marked by honest work. The elders said, "Oh, when a river knows its path, it does not quarrel with stones." Chief looked at Kunli and thought, that is our company now. When the crowd drifted away, Chief and Kunli lingered. Chief reached into his pocket and brought out a key. "The apartment is ready," he said. "You can keep your corner under the flyover, or you can accept this, or you can accept both, and use the apartment to rest and write. I made no choice for you." Kunli held the key like a seed. He had slept under open sky for long enough that the idea of a roof without the chorus of traffic felt strange. He lifted his face and considered, not rushing the answer. "I will accept," he said at last, "to have a place to bring young people to teach them how to listen. But I will still sit under the flyover some days. It is a classroom with no walls. If you forget where you learned to hear, you go deaf again." Chief laughed softly and nodded. "Keep your classroom." Years later, new managers joined and old ones retired. The listening office became part of orientation for partners from other countries. A delegation from East Africa came and took notes and returned home to build their own version, tuned to their cities, their rivers, their languages. A banker from the north walked into the listening office and left with a plan to restructure small loans by season. A filmmaker sat with Kunli and recorded hours of conversations, weaving a documentary not about a product,
but about the warm engine of attention. A boy who once stole a phone returned as a young man and brought a letter of thanks. People had corrected him instead of discarding him, and he was now a repairer with pride and grease under his nails. On a quiet evening, Kunli walked the path he had walked so many times and paused at the edge of the flyover. The blue nylon bag had been replaced with a small backpack, but he still smoothed the ground with his palm before sitting. He felt the old coolness of concrete rise into his bones and the city's noise wash over him like familiar surf. A woman approached with hesitant steps. "I heard you can help," she said, twisting her hands. "My son wants to quit school to go to the city and hustle. He says school is slow. My heart is running." Kunli patted the place beside him. "Come," he said, "we will untangle it." Step by step, they talked for an hour. They mapped a path for the boy that involved part-time work and evening classes, and a place in the apprenticeship program. The woman left with a square of confidence in her chest. Kunli watched her go and thought of the long road from tears in a black SUV to a company that brewed light and trust. He thought of how delicate success felt, when it did not sit on the shoulders of one man, but was woven into thousands of hands. He rose and walked toward the listening office to lock up. On the door, gold letters spelled a phrase people came for every day. It said, "I can correct it." It was not a boast written in the sky. It was a hand extended across a table, a willingness to sit with problems until they stopped scaring everyone, a promise to go to the ground and start from there. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and comment.